Everyone. There we go. We're live now. Good evening.
Hello.
I'm Catherine Marie with Abnormal Alabama.
And I'm Kevin Kane with myhaunteddogs.com. And welcome to Normal Alabama.
Welcome. Kevin's brought us a doll for this evening.
Yes, like I always do. This is weird without that silly old man that usually sits here.
I know.
Tortures.
I don't know that I'm going to do as good a job as him. I don't talk as much as him.
Oh, the music started playing.
It started playing.
He said, "Can y'all talk about me now?" This is Lucian, an adorable musical clown dog. And I got this. I think I've had him 4 years. I got him from a lady named Cherie Richardson, who used to have a little business called Doll Haven, where she had a haunted collection. And she would.
Cannot hear that.
Cannot hear Kevin.
Kevin's got to talk louder.
Well, okay, I can't scream. Is that better? I hope you all can hear me now. Kelsey's watching. He says he can't hear. All right. Should we turn the volume up, or is it?
It's up all the way.
Up all the way. Uh-oh.
Yep. It's up all the way.
Well, I guess I'll just have to talk a little louder. But anyway, Lucian is from Doll Haven. Used to be Doll Haven. She doesn't deal with the haunted items anymore now, or at least she doesn't adopt them out. But there was a funny story with the way she came about. Kelsey said, "What is that silly thing he's holding?" Well, I'm telling the story if you'd listen.
He's not even here and he's messing us up. All right, Kelsey, be quiet so Kevin can tell the story.
He said, "Go to StreamYard," so we're not on StreamYard. All right. Well, anyway, it was funny how I came about this because she used to keep Lucian in a curio cabinet next to another doll that, well, good grief, how are you?
How am I loud?
How are you loud? They can't hear me.
I think he's just messing with us.
He's messing with us, isn't he?
I think so.
But turn the computer toward him a bit. He's playing producer while we're in here trying to do our show live.
He's messing with us and he's not even here.
But not at all, he says. Okay, getting back to Lucian's story. She had him in a curio cabinet sitting next to a doll that was haunted by this kind of feisty older lady. Apparently, Lucian didn't get along with that old lady. And Kelsey's messaging these funny messages. He said, "Tell you not to talk so loud." So anyway, Lucian didn't get along with that old lady spirit, and Sherry could kind of sense that. So she got the spirit box out and asked Lucian, "Are you wanting to go to another place?" And he said he wanted to go to a new home. And she asked why, and he says, "I can't deal with that old prude." He said that out of the spirit. "I can't deal with that old prude," out of the spirit box. So she contacted me and said, "Would you like a clown doll?" He was my first haunted clown doll. And he plays a little tune. Oh, and he moves. Look at him move. Oh, it's a Christmas tune. I should have brought this in December. I didn't realize it was a Christmas tune. Well, look, all the snowflakes and candy canes. I should have known.
I should have given it away.
That shows how little observant I am. But anyway, I'll tell Lucian's story. Oh, he's not done yet. I think it's adorable how he kind of sways in his drum.
Just so y'all know, he did not touch that.
Yeah. He does go off sometimes. I think that's his way of trying to communicate. But Lucian died at the age of 38, so he was younger than me when he passed away. It was in an accident during a ball game. He coached teenagers in baseball, and during one of their games or practices, he was bent over at the mound, and the kid who was at bat wasn't watching, and he swung. Lucian received a blow over the head from the baseball bat when the kid swung it. He passed away a few days later from the head trauma. Lucian also, when he was alive, he liked to dress up as a clown and entertain children. And this is why he chose a clown doll like this to haunt. And he is quite the comedian, as I illustrated in the story with the old prude. It might not have been prude. He might use another word, but he was not happy with that old lady ghost in that house.
Someone she wasn't very pleasant.
So, and he's funny on the spirit box when I've talked to him. One night I was doing a spirit box in the great room. He sits on the shelf of the cabinet in the great room. And I asked, Lucian, are you here? And he goes, yeah. And I said, are you doing okay, Lucian? Yeah. And just the way he answers, his voice is just hilarious. So, but he's a very good, peaceful spirit. And he's never been a problem. And I'm happy to have him in my house. So that is Lucian's story. Maybe he'll sound off some more music during the show. We'll see. I should have brought him on before Christmas. I forgot he was a Christmas clown.
I think they're burning something in here.
Yeah, I got a whiff a second ago. One of the burger patties.
Somebody's cooking it too much. Kelsey sent a Giphy of Jack in the
Box. Yeah, that's what I want. Even though I've got one of my haunted dolls is a Jack in the Box clown, but he doesn't have the box anymore. It broke a long time ago. So it's the clown. But I would love to get a Jack in the Box, a haunted Jack in the Box. I haven't found one yet, but that would be neat to have.
Maybe one's in the near future.
I'm sure, because there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of things they have on eBay and Etsy that they claim to be haunted, but I'm always careful about, if I don't know the seller. And if they don't have a load of good feedback, you got to wonder, some of them, I've even been on, some of the sellers would have things posted, and they'd have almost the exact same story with every doll. And it's like, what? Is that not obvious? I mean, one of them had the Annabelle story with. They didn't even change the names. They even said the Warrens dealt with it. I'm like, this is not the Annabelle doll. They think people are, I guess there are some people that are uneducated that would probably buy it. So that's why you got to be careful on eBay.
I've got a few that I'm adopting out that I do not have room for. I have one named Heather, who her brother was mean to her, and she passed away. I want to say 32-ish. Oh, I've even got her. Tell me saying it ain't Burger King tonight. And anyway, I think she was 32, 34, something like that. And she passed away, and I actually have her obituary.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it was her doll. And so I got her up for adoption. And I'm trying to think. I've got Marley. Did you see the picture of Marley? Mabel. Mabel's her name. Mabel.
I don't think I've seen the picture.
She's a young little doll.
Is it on the Creepy Dolls?
Yes.
I'll have to look at that and see. Of course, I can't right now. I'm about to be relocating, so I'm going to have to put my collection in the climate-free storage so that it won't scare people off when they come look at the house. There are going to be a couple of them I'm going to leave in there on display that just look like regular antique dolls. But those are the ones I know wouldn't like being stuck in storage. Thankfully, they fit in. They won't look like scary dolls.
You go with Patty?
Yeah, because she got that cracked leg. I don't want to stick her in a box. And
I could see me walking in and Kevin's run,
I'm getting them out before the real estate. She's gonna come next Monday.
Does she know about the dog?
And no, I didn't say anything. I just told her there's some additional things I'm moving out that might be cluttering the house. So I'm gonna move those out before you come. I still got yours. Did you want to
Yes.
come?
Yeah, I want to come.
Okay.
I'll come get them up from you. I got a place for them. Don't laugh at my pop-ups. I got a virus on my computer.
Oh Lord.
And I get some of the strangest pop-ups.
We had our Friday the 13th thing. That crazy pop-up came up in the middle of the movie.
Yeah. I've been trying to get rid of them. But I don't know how to. So if you know how to, come meet me over here and fix my computer for me.
I need to share our feed on the.
Oh, I forgot to share our feed
I need
too.
to share the feed on my Facebook. This is on Abnormal, Alabama.
Let's see. Let me go here.
Shouldn't take long. Here we go. I'm just gonna share it on
Let's see.
my Facebook page, and then I guess we'll move on to.
We'll move on to it.
Let's see.
Look at this. We have been talking for 11 minutes.
For 11 minutes.
Wow.
Good grief. That's a long time.
For me, it is. Kelsey won't
And,
even let me talk. It's like, hush, let me get a word in. No, we love Kelsey. We love you.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, it's weird to not be interrupted every few seconds. Well,
You'll be interrupted. Kevin,
No.
Kevin.
Or with usually with wisecracks.
You okay?
Yeah.
You okay?
You okay?
He did that all the way.
All the way from Cherie's. Oh, speaking of her, have you watched her? Her moving doll was featured this week on Josh Gates' show. What's it? Expedition Unknown.
I think so.
Or this was the follow-up. It's Expedition X, I believe is what he's calling this. And he said it was funny as he was introducing the clip and said her name. He said, I'm still kind of wondering about this woman. All these dolls.
She has a house full of dolls.
Yes.
Like a bedroom that's shelf after shelf after shelf after shelf after shelf.
Yes.
On 4 walls.
Yes.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to step over here to the side.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
You going to abandon me?
Nope.
Okay. All right. We thought tonight we would talk about a place I've been to down in Louisiana, in the bayous of Louisiana, down there in the Cajun country. I've been down there several times, and I've spent a total of 5 nights in this location. And every time, whether I spend the night or if I just go visit during the day for a quick tour, there's always something that happens. So I wanted to talk about this. I don't believe we've talked about it yet. The Smithsonian Institute has listed it, in their opinion, as the most haunted house in the United States, even beating out the Amityville house. I am talking about the Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana. This is a plantation that's been around for hundreds of years. It was built in 1794, and it still stands today. And it's open as a bed and breakfast, so you can actually go spend the night in the rooms inside the house. They have garden rooms outside on the property. People think if you spend the night out there, you're safe from the ghosts, but after I share my story, you'll realize that's not the truth. So I'm going to start out here by giving a little bit of the history of the Myrtles Plantation, but it's got all kinds of phenomenon, our favorite word we like to use here. Handprints in the mirrors, footsteps on the stairs, mysterious smells, vanishing objects, death by poison, hangings, murder, gunfire, all have occurred at the Myrtles Plantation in the West Feliciana town of St. Francisville, Louisiana. and it holds the rather large record of hosting more ghostly phenomena than just about any other house in the country. The Myrtles Plantation was constructed by David Bradford in 1794. I'm going to put on my eyes here so they don't get tired while I'm reading this. And since that time, it's been the scene of at least 10 murders. That's a lot of murders in one residence. David Bradford was one of 5 children born in America to Irish immigrants. In 1777, he purchased a tract of land and a small stone house near Washington County, Pennsylvania. He became a successful attorney, a businessman, and deputy attorney general for the county. His first attempt to marry ended only days before his wedding. No details are known about this, but he later met and married Elizabeth Porter in 1785 and started a family. As his family and business grew, Bradford needed a larger home, and he built a new one in the town of Washington. The house became well known in the region for its size and remarkable craftsmanship, with a mahogany staircase and woodwork imported from England. Fancy stuff. Many of the items had to be transported from the East Coast and over the Pennsylvania mountains at great expense. Bradford would use the parlor of the house as an office where he would meet with his clients. Unfortunately, he was not able to enjoy his splendid new house for long. In 1794, he was forced to flee, leaving his family behind. Whiskey Rebellion, and he was involved in the infamous Whiskey Rebellion, and legend has it that George Washington placed a price on his head for his role in the affair. The Whiskey Rebellion took place in western Pennsylvania and began as a series of grievances over high prices and taxes forced on those living along the frontier at that time. The complaints eventually erupted into violence when a mob attacked and burned down the home of a local tax collector. In the months that followed, residents resisted attacks that had been placed on whiskey. And while most of the protests were nonviolent, Washington mobilized a militia and sent it in to suppress the rebellion. Once the protests were brought under control, Bradford left the region on the advice of some of the other principals in the affair. So after leaving Washington, Bradford first went to Pittsburgh. Leaving his family in safety, he traveled down the Ohio River to the Mississippi and eventually settled at Bayou Sarah near what is now known as St. Francisville, Louisiana. Bradford was no stranger to this area. He had originally traveled there in 1792 to try and obtain a land grant from Spain. When he returned in 1796, he purchased 600 acres of land, and a year later built a modest 8-room home near Baton Rouge that he named Laurel Grove. He lived there until 1799, when he received a pardon for his role in the Whiskey Rebellion from newly elected President John Adams. He was given the pardon for his assistance in establishing a boundary line known historically as Ellicott's Line between Spain and the United States. So this guy's kind of a big part of history there. After receiving the pardon, Bradford returned to Pennsylvania to bring his wife and 5 children back to Louisiana and brought them to live at Bayou Sarah. They settled into a comfortable life there in what is now known as the Myrtles Plantation. Bradford occasionally took in students who wanted to study law. One of them, Clark Woodruff, who's going to be another part of Myrtle's history, not only earned a law degree, but also married his teacher's daughter, Sarah Matilda. Now, after Bradford was gone, Judge Woodruff and his wife lived on there at Myrtle's Plantation, and they had 2 lovely daughters, Cordelia and Camellia. And as time went on, he built on the plantation, and it grew. They had a lot of harvest there, cotton, all kinds of things they grew in that place. And they had land servants like many people did on plantations back then, but they also had house servants. And that's where we get to the legend of Chloe. Possibly the most well-known of the Myrtle's supposed ghosts, Chloe was reportedly a slave owned by Clark and Sarah Woodruff. According to one story, Clark Woodruff pressured or forced Chloe into being his mistress. And back during that time, a lot of plantation owners did that. In fact, they didn't care if their wives knew, and a lot of times the wives knew, and they didn't do anything about it. Nowadays, you might not live if you did something like that. But back then, it was just a way of life. But other versions of the legend have Chloe listening in at the keyholes to learn of Clark Woodruff's business dealings. They say he caught her a few times outside the door eavesdropping while he was talking to potential clients and trying to set up business deals. Chloe was just very, she was like a cat. She was very curious, and she had to have her nose in everything. She was also kind of young. They've said that she was maybe in her late teens, early 20s, and she was a mulatto slave. Finally, though, after the judge had warned her, "Don't listen to my door, don't let me catch you anymore," one day he caught her once again before she could scurry away when he opened the door. This time, his fury knew no bounds, and he said, "That's it. I've warned you. Now you're going to get your punishment." He grabbed Chloe, who was kind of a slender girl, and dragged her by the arm along the floor as she was kicking and screaming, dragged her down the hall, out the door, out over the veranda, down the steps, into the yard, where he slung her onto the grass. He pulled out his sword and chop. He cut off her left ear as punishment. So from that day on, Chloe wore a turban on her head, and she always tilted it to the side so it covered her deformity. And she would hang an earring on the end of the turban to make it look like she had an ear. Well, Chloe was very frightened because back then it was always easier to be a house slave than to work on the land, because the masters of the land slaves were not very kind. They liked to beat their employees out there. And she didn't want to go to the fields in that hot sun and slave out there all day. She wanted to stay in the comfort of the home. So she decided she better do something to get back in the good graces of the judge and his family. Well, it was the oldest daughter's birthday coming up, and she thought to herself, she made a plan. On that plantation, and it's still there today if you look around, there grows a certain plant called oleander leaves. And if you boil an oleander leaf, it lets off sort of an arsenic, a poison. And it can be very dangerous if you consume it. But Chloe knew of the plant, and she decided, well, what I'll do is I'll bake a birthday cake for the oldest daughter. I'll put in just a little bit of oleander leaf into the mix, and then I'll make them just sick enough to where I can nurse them back to health, and I'll be the hero. Well, unfortunately, she ground up a little bit too much oleander leaf. On the day of the birthday celebration, the judge was out of town on business, so it was just Sarah and the two girls. Chloe served up the birthday cake, which they consumed happily. And it wasn't very long after dinner and cake that Chloe was brought back into the house by the screams and the agony of Sarah coming from her bedroom. She ran in and found Sarah across the bed, gagging, sick. Chloe knew the poison had started taking effect, but she didn't realize she had put too much oleander. As Sarah laid there coughing and vomiting upstairs, the children started crying. Sarah, in a weak voice, told Chloe, "The kids, look on the kids. Don't worry about me." Chloe rushed up the stairs, and by the time she got into the nursery where the children were playing, the two girls were already writhing on the floor, vomiting and convulsing. Sarah and the three children died that evening from the poisoning. In a heavy panic, Chloe went and told some of the other servants what she had done, and the rest of them became terrified because they said, when the judge comes on, he's going to blame all of us unless we do something. So they had a mock trial, all the slaves, and they decided to hang Chloe right there on the spot. So they dragged her to a tree just off the front yard. It's still there today. There's a big cypress tree, and they threw a rope over it and hung her from the tree where she died. Then they took her body down, carried it off to the Mississippi River, and tossed it in. Her body was never seen again. So when the judge came home, he found that his wife and 2 daughters had been killed. He lost his whole family, and the culprit was already dead. And in his grief and agony, he couldn't stay any longer in the house, so he sold it away and left and never came back to Louisiana. But it's said today that people have seen the figure of a servant girl roaming the property. People have been laying in bed at night in the bed and breakfast rooms with the lights out, and they're going off to sleep, and they suddenly feel hands take hold of the cover and gently lift it up as if somebody were tucking them in. When they open their eyes and look, they see a girl, a young mulatto girl with a turban on her head, very transparent, looking down and smiling at them. A lot of people have panicked because that's the scary thing to wake up to in the middle of the night. They said they've had a lot of people check out in the middle of the night because Chloe startled them. She doesn't mean to. She's not a bitter spirit. She's actually a nice lady. But she loves to play with earrings. So a lot of women have claimed that when they take their earrings off and leave it on the dresser or the sink in the bathroom, whatever, they'll come back and the earrings will be missing. And they'll look all over and they'll find them in the strangest place. In fact, on my visit there, my first visit, there was an older lady staying there with her husband in the downstairs suite. It's called the Bradford Suite, named after the original owner I talked about earlier. And she lost her earrings and couldn't find them. And they went on a historical tour. And as they were going upstairs into the hallway there where the old nursery was, there were her earrings stuck in a painting inside that locked house. They always keep it locked unless they take a tour in there because they don't want people going in there messing with things for insurance purposes. So the current owners, John and Tita Moss, moved in. Tita was a student of commercial. I think she studied, her major was commercial business. And she had been in that business before. And when they had made a lot of money with their business, they had found out that Myrtle's Plantation was available for a purchase. And so John and Tita swooped in. They thought it'd be great to have historical bed and breakfast right in the heart of Louisiana. So they bought it. And of course, they were told about the ghosts. Well, Tita thought herself automatically, well, what a great commercial ploy. She didn't believe in ghosts. And she thought, well, it's got to be made up to make business, but if that's what they want to do, we'll just let them keep doing what they do. So they actually moved into the house. They actually decided to live in a couple of the suites and leave the rest open for bed and breakfast. When they moved in, their little boy, who was only about 3 or 4 at the time, would call his mother into the room he stayed in. He would point up to the large chandelier at the ceiling and say, "Mommy, make that little girl come down from the chandelier." And Tita would look up and she wouldn't see anything. But the little boy insisted there's a little girl hanging on the chandelier. And she wondered if he was imagining it or was there maybe something to it. Then she started hearing her name called. She would be in her room or somewhere in the house, and it sounded like a voice from the next room. A female voice would call out, "Tita, Tita." And she'd go look and wouldn't find anything. And she taught the employees there to find out more about the ghosts because now she started thinking there's something to this. And they told her about the ghosts, mainly Chloe, but also Sarah Woodruff and the 2 daughters, Cordelia and Camellia, have all 3 been seen around the plantation. Oftentimes, Sarah Woodruff has been seen crying in her old bedroom. People have walked in the room to find a weeping woman sitting on the bed, only to have her vanish right in front of their eyes. That's very disconcerting when you're a guest that, is not expecting a ghost and you walk in, there's a weeping woman sitting on your bed and she vanishes. But also the children have been seen playing, running around the fountain outside in the back of the house. One of the tour guides said that one day, it was late in the afternoon, it was a slow day, and a couple showed up at the house to take a historical tour. And she looked out, she saw them walking up, and she saw their little daughter running up behind them with a little white dress on. And she said, "Oh, how cute." And she went to the door and opened up to welcome them. And then the couple walked in. When she looked around, she said, "Oh, where's your daughter?" The couple looked at each other and looked at her, and they said, "We don't have a daughter." And that lady thought to herself, then who was the girl I saw running up behind them? So she believes that may have been one of the Woodruff girls. People have seen the girls inside the home. In fact, one of the hostesses at a party they gave in that house decided to spend the night in one of the rooms. This is one of my favorite stories. And it was in the Bradford suite. I've spent a few nights there myself. I was so excited I couldn't even sleep. But she stayed in that Bradford suite, and she went to bed. And she was another skeptical person that didn't really think much of the ghost stories. But she went to bed, and in the middle of the night, she said around 2 in the morning, she awoke to her bed moving. And she looks up, and she sees a little girl at the end of the bed bouncing up and down, looking at her and laughing and just bouncing up and down. And she said she laid there frozen, watching this little apparition until it suddenly just faded into the darkness and the motion stopped. And she buried her head in the pillow and just cried. She didn't know what to think. She was terrified. She'd never seen a ghost or experienced anything like that before. And so the next morning she got up, and they could tell she was very frazzled when she came out of her room, and they asked her what happened. She didn't sleep the rest of the night, by the way. And she told what had happened. And the owner, I don't know if it was Tina or the owner before that, but they told her, well, yeah, the Woodruff girls have been known to bounce on the beds, and they like to play in the house. So it may have been one of them. Well, needless to say, that woman would not come back in the house and never had an event there again. But news travels fast with these ghost stories, and Myrtle's got so much of a reputation that TV came along and decided they wanted to come out there and film. There's actually back in the late 80s, early 90s, they did an episode of Unsolved Mysteries out there where they told some of these stories. They've also filmed movies out there. But what was the scariest one incident that involved a TV production was when Oprah, the Oprah Winfrey Show, for a Halloween special, Oprah sent out her producer and a cameraman to the Myrtles Plantation, Louisiana, to film and tell their story. There's a particular room, a bedroom in that house they used to have open for a bed and breakfast, but because there's been so much activity, they no longer let anyone stay there anymore because a lot of people have been frightened in that room. The furniture moves around at nighttime, footsteps, voices, disembodied voices. But this was the last straw when they let anyone stay there. The Oprah Winfrey producer was the last one they let stay there because of what happened to her. They did some filming. They filmed the staff telling their stories and the owner and told about the history. And during the filming, they kept having malfunctions. The cameras would cut off, cords would come unplugged for no reason. So the crew has become a little bit, weirded out by all these events. But the producer decided she wanted to stay the night in that downstairs room that used to be open. She woke up in the middle of the night to a piercing scream, and she shot up in bed, and she looks around, and all was quiet. And then she heard what she said sounded like rustling in a tree limb, like if you were outside under a tree and the limbs are rustling. But she's inside a house, and the walls are thick. You can't really hear outside if you're inside the house. These are thick walls in this old house. So she looked up, and she described it as like a vision. She looked up, and the ceiling was gone, and there was a tree over her. And she saw something moving. All of a sudden, this body of a woman plunged out of the tree limbs, hanging from a noose, and it was hung there, looking at her. And she screamed, and she tore out of that room. And the staff don't stay there at night. They have a caretaker that lives in a cottage out back, or used to. And she ran across that yard, ran to the caretaker's house and banged on the door and woke him up. and told him what she had seen. So he went back, and she would not go in the house, but he went to check the room, and nobody was in there. Everything is as it was supposed to be. So he figured she might have seen a vision of what happened to Chloe. But that's pretty eerie to wake up in your room, look up, and there's a tree all of a sudden, and a body comes flying out, dangling from a noose. I mean, that's pretty creepy.
I don't remember how to stay the rest of the night.
No, she did. I don't think she would go back in the house. The caretaker may have taken her into his cottage. I can't remember. That's the other thing. They could never really keep a lot of caretakers because of some of the goings on that property. But I want to share my experience on one of my stays there when I stayed in the Bradford suite. And I like to go, if possible, on the weekend because on Friday nights they have what's called a candlelight tour. Now, on a historical tour, they'll tell you historical things about the house as they take you around, and they'll throw in some of the ghost stories because everybody loves to hear that. But they save the best for what they call the candlelight tours. They used to actually use candles, but scared people with candles in a 200-year-old cypress house, that's not going to mix well. So they stopped allowing candles in the house. Now they use these little flashlights and little fake things or they just have the tour guide carry a lantern, to kind of give the illusion of light, candlelight or gaslight like they would have had back then. But when I stayed on the night when I got to do the candlelight tour, man, they showed no mercy with those stories they told. There were some terrifying stories. One lady woke up. Now, I haven't told this part of the Myrtles history. At one time during the Civil War, like they did with a lot of plantations back then, they used the Myrtles as a hospital for wounded soldiers. So a lot of people have seen the ghosts of Civil War soldiers, or sometimes they see ghosts of nurses. And here's an example. There was a couple staying in one of the rooms inside the house. And she woke up in the middle of the night. No, it was the man. The man woke up in the middle of the night when he felt his leg being lifted up. And he thought his wife was up to something. He woke up. He was half asleep. He woke all the way up and looked, and she was asleep next to him. He looks around toward the bed where his foot has been lifted up, and there is a nurse holding his leg and doing like she's wrapping it. Well, he was frozen for a second there. And he said the nurse looked transparent. She didn't look real, but she was wearing an old nurse's uniform like they might have worn back in the 1800s. And finally, the apparition vanished and his leg dropped back down. Well, he grabbed his wife and shook her awake, told her what happened. They dove out of the house and drove away, went down to the Best Western to spend the rest of the night, and they wouldn't come back for their luggage. They called the office at Myrtles and said, "You're going to have to send us our luggage. We're not setting foot back on that property." So the Myrtles actually mailed them their luggage. But that's just one of the examples. But that time I stayed in the Bradford suite, the same one where the lady woke up and saw the little Woodruff girl bouncing on the bed. And I was just so excited. I couldn't even sleep that night because I was wanting something to happen. And I will tell you, that suite is right next to the room that's sealed off at night, the one where the Oprah Winfrey producer stayed. And I promise you, I heard furniture being dragged across the room in the middle of the night. And they warned us that that has happened a lot. You can hear furniture moving in that room. There's no way to get in there. The doors are locked. There's a door in that suite you could get to, but it's sealed up. So I couldn't get in there to look. But the next morning, I told them I'd heard furniture dragging, and we went in there and checked, and everything was where it was supposed to be. So that was very odd. But they told me a story on that candlelight tour before I went to my room that night. The hostess who was telling the stories talked about Tita Moss and her experiences. One of the things they'll show you on the tour is a photo that Tita took when she first moved into the plantation. She took pictures around the home and outside for insurance purposes. And again, at the time, she was skeptical. She didn't believe in ghosts, wasn't looking for one. But in one of the photos in the backyard looking toward the house, where the house ends and the old kitchen building begins, there's a little pathway between the houses. In the photo is the figure of a young woman wearing a servant's dress and a turban. and you can see it clearly in that photo. You can Google it online, just put in Chloe Ghost Myrtle's Plantation. You can pull that picture up. Tina sent that into a specialist to have a closer look to see if it was maybe something else. But he could make out, and he sent her the measurements, he could make out the perfect form of a human female figure standing there between those buildings, and she's facing Tita when Tita took the picture. Then he pointed something else out that she didn't even see to begin with. Just above that apparition, on the roof of the house, you can see the two figures of little children sitting on the roof. People have said they've seen the little Woodruff girls playing on the roof. Why they go up there, I don't know. In fact, there's a window up there on the second floor that they'll oftentimes come in and they'll find it open. And this is one of those really tough, stubborn windows that's hard to open and close. But somehow that thing opens by itself during the night. And they have to go up there and close it. They think the little girls might be going out there to play on the roof. But you can see them in the picture there, sitting on the roof like they're hiding from Chloe. And she believes that is Chloe standing there in between the buildings there. It's a very see-through figure. You can see the boards of the building behind her, right through her. It's really amazing. They have a blow-up of that picture they show on the tour. So I got to see the blow-up that Tita had done years and years ago on the tour. But they started talking about one of Tita's scariest experiences. When they lived in the house, now they don't live there. They bought their own house in Baton Rouge, so all of the suites are open for bed and breakfast in the home. But when they lived there in that downstairs suite, Tita, probably about the second or third night, she was awakened by what sounded like something falling, like a large bookcase or something falling over and crashing on the floor. So she got up and hurried out to the hallway and checked the rooms in the hallway, and everything was as it should be. So she went back to bed, and then she said it was around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and she slid back into the bed next to her husband, and she put her arm around him, and she felt him stir. And she said, "It's okay, honey. I've checked. There's nothing there." Well, it's really dark in the room, so she couldn't, make out, but she felt him move. So she figured he was probably waking up by the because of the disturbance. Well, she looked over, took a last glance toward the door. She noticed near the door is the bathroom. The bathroom door was closed and the light was on in there. She could see the light coming through the cracks. She heard the toilet flush. The door opened and out comes her husband. She freezes up and she looks down at the bed where the figure had been, where she had put her arm there, and nobody was there except cold, dead air where the figure had been laying. Something was laying in that bed with her, and she thought it was her husband. They said they've had that happen with guests who sleep in that bedroom. Sometimes they wake up and they find somebody laying next to them who suddenly vanishes. And this was the kicker. As the tour guide tells this story on the candlelight tour I'm on, she turns to me and says, "That's your room tonight." She said, "That's the Bradford suite, so you're in the cuddle room." Everybody's laughing at me. I said, "Hey, if I wake up and somebody's next to me, I'm going to kick them out of the bed." This is a beautiful woman, but that didn't happen. But I couldn't sleep. I tried to go to sleep. I couldn't. I left the lamp on. I wanted something to happen so badly. And it did that same evening. The suite is huge. You've got the antique bed, and you got an old fireplace that's blocked off now. And there's a separate sitting room in here. And I went into the sitting room to sit and watch some movies on my computer. By the way, there's another thing. If you do stay at the Myrtles, they make it where you're really in the past. So there's no TV, no radios. The only thing they have remotely modern is a digital clock with no radio. So you can at least have an alarm clock. There's no TV. There's none of that. So
internet?
I guess there's Wi-Fi in that old house. They didn't want to go in there and tear up the walls and stuff, ruin the house. So I don't think there's Wi-Fi there, anything like that. You have to, use your own devices. But I took a portable DVD player that I used to have. I was watching some movies in the sitting room. And I'm sitting there just minding my own business, and it's kind of late in the evening. I have the light on, and there's a lamp on in the bedroom right next door. I look up, glance up at the door, going in the bedroom, and there standing in the door is this little girl peeking at me just as clear. She had dark ringlets coming down, her little dark hair. I think there was a little bow up here, and she had on this ruffled dress, little ruffles on the shoulder, and she's looking at me. All of a sudden, she took off. Now, once upon a time, that probably would have scared me, but by then I was a lot more into ghost, exploring, and I've been in some scary places, the Queen Mary and other places. So I ran to it. I didn't run away. I ran to it. I jumped up and ran after. I said, "Wait, come back. I want to talk to you." So I ran in the bedroom, and nobody was there. I searched high and low, and I couldn't find a trace of anybody. But I think I spotted one of those Woodruff girls looking in to see what I was up to. And that was so precious. It didn't scare me. I was excited. I couldn't wait to tell them the next morning about what I'd seen. And the lady that makes the breakfast said, there was a woman that stayed here last week that was in that bathroom in your room, and she was putting her makeup on. She said in the mirror, she kept seeing a little girl peek in the doorway and dart away. So that little girl loves to hang out and watch people in that room. And it's probably the same girl that was bouncing on the bed that night when that hostess stayed there, which incidentally was the same room I stayed in. I was hoping so bad I would go to sleep, wake up, and see a little girl bouncing on the bed just to have that experience, but it didn't happen. I had all my equipment. I was taking pictures. I didn't capture anything. But it was amazing. Now, there's another story there. Like I said earlier when I started telling about this, there have been at least 10 murders in the house or on the property at Myrtle's Plantation. The famous one is William Winter. William had been born to Captain Samuel Winter and Sarah Bowman on October 28, 1820, in Bath, Maine. So he was a northerner. Little is known about his early life or how he managed to meet Sarah Mulford Sterling. However, they were married on June 3rd, 1852 at the Myrtles. And together they had 6 children: Mary, Sarah, Kate, Ruffin, William, and Francis. Some of the rooms are named after these children. There's a Ruffin room. There's the Sarah room. So some of the rooms in the bed and breakfast rooms in the plantation are named after his children. Kate died from typhoid at age 3. And the Winters first lived at Gantmore Plantation near Clinton, Louisiana, and then they bought a plantation on the west side of the Mississippi known as Arborough. But after the Civil War, William was named as agent and attorney by Mary Sterling to help her with her remaining lands, including Ingleside, Crescent Park, Botany Bay, and the Myrtles. In return, Mary gave William the use of the Myrtles as his home. Times were terrible, and Winter was unable to hold on to it. By December 1867, he was completely bankrupt, and the Myrtles was sold by the U.S. Marshal to the New York Warehouse and Security Company on April 15, 1868. 2 years later, however, on April 23rd, the property was sold back to Mistress Sarah M. Winter, the wife, as the heir of her late father, the heir of her late father, Ruffin Sterling. It is unknown just what occurred to cause this reversal of fortune, but it seemed as though things were improving for the family once again. But soon after, tragedy struck at the Myrtles once more. According to the January 1871 issue of the Point Coupe Democrat newspaper, Winter was teaching a Sunday school lesson in the gentleman's parlor of the house when he heard someone approach the house on horseback. After the stranger called out to him, saying that he had some business with him, Winter went out onto the side gallery of the house, and there he was shot. The stranger took off on horse after shooting him. Winter collapsed onto the porch, but he managed to pick himself back up and stumble back through the parlor doors. His wife was upstairs in the upstairs bedroom where they slept. He made it to the steps, and he climbed the stairs, bleeding out, until he reached the middle step, calling out to his wife. She heard him and came running out of the top bedroom to the landing. She saw him falling on the stairs, and she ran to him and caught him. He died there on that middle step in her arms. To this day, there is a red blood stain on that step that they could never get rid of. So Mr. Winter's blood is still there where he died. They've scrubbed that step, and it just comes right back. They can't get rid of it. So ever since then, and even to this day, people who stay overnight in that upstairs bedroom at the top of those stairs, they say during the night they've heard footsteps stumble up the stairs, and a weak voice calls out, and they hear somebody falling. But when they run out to look, there's nobody there. Ghost Adventures, Zach Bagans and the crew went out there and filmed an episode several years ago at the Myrtles, and they put a ball on that middle step and set up a camera. And they were talking to, I believe it was William Winter's spirit, to see if he was there, could he move that ball? So they're seeing that ball is just there. All of a sudden, it didn't roll. It was like somebody had kicked it, and it suddenly popped off the step and bounced down the stairs. And they caught that on film, and it's on that episode. So that was pretty awesome. Speaking of filming, I mentioned earlier that there have been movies filmed there. There is a particular movie called The Long Hot Summer. Now, there was an old Paul Newman movie. The original movie came out, I think, in the 50s or maybe early 60s. But in 1985, they did a remake, a TV movie that had Don Johnson and Sybil Shepherd. And they filmed not only at the Myrtles, but they actually shot some scenes inside the house. Now, while they were there filming, they had a lot of weird events go on. In the parlor, the movie crew, went in and cleared out all the antique furniture, not only for safety, but so they could film a ballroom scene in there. So they moved all the furniture out into the main hallway, and they stepped outside to get their cameras. Nobody was in there. The house was clear. They stepped out to get their cameras to bring them in. And when they came in, the furniture was right back where it was. They had to move it all back out. And they left again and came back, and the furniture was right back where it was. Now, there's no security cameras or anything in there, but that would have been pretty cool if that had been caught on film, to see what it looked like. But apparently the spirits didn't like their furniture being tampered with. So they finally, I think, had to resolve with arranging the furniture where there was some space, and that seemed to satisfy the spirits. And they were able to film their scene. But I think it was Sybil Shepherd was offered to stay there, and she refused. She would not sleep there and insisted they put her up in a hotel in Baton Rouge. She would not stay after dark in that plantation. But they had, just like the Oprah Winfrey show, they had cameras would come unplugged or just suddenly die in the middle of filming. They had microphone problems, static. I think they claimed one of the guys, the boom mic guy, heard a voice on the microphone that didn't belong to any of the actors, but they weren't recording at the time, so they had no evidence. But he said he heard a man's voice saying, "What are you doing here?" or something like that. And it wasn't the actors. So that kind of startled him. They tell you at Myrtles, they do not allow any Ouija boards on the premises. So you're not allowed to have any. There's a lady who used to own the Myrtles before the Mosses bought it. Her name was Frances. I can't remember her last name. I know her first name was Frances. And she happened to know the late actress Margot Kidder. One time when Margot Kidder was filming in Louisiana, she decided to come and spend the night with Frances in the Myrtles house. Well, Frances warned her like any other guest. She said, if you come, it is a haunted house, be respectful. And of course, right away, Margot's first reaction was, well, I'd love to bring a Ouija board and see if we can scare something up. She goes, no, you cannot bring a Ouija board because it's been said people have tried to use those here and don't get a good result. The spirits do not like it. Well, Margot came in with a few friends and Frances went to bed. And unbeknownst to her, Margot had snuck in a Ouija board. She and her two friends tried to contact the spirits. All Frances knows is that she was out. She lived in that little cottage house outside at the time, and all she knows is she was in her house and heard screams coming from the main house. She looked out the window and saw the parlor lights of the window were just flashing. And she hurried out of the house, and before she could cross the yard, Margot Kidder and her two friends came tearing out of that house, and they peeled rubber to their cars. And she chased after them, and Margot explained and that's when Frances noticed she had a Ouija board under her arm. Frances said, "I told you not to use that." Margot wouldn't tell her what happened or what they saw, but she was white as a sheet, and she refused to stay a second longer, and they left the premises. So they've even told people, if we see you with a Ouija board, you will be asked to leave the property, no refund. So don't take a Ouija board to the Myrtles. And let's see, what other stories have they got? Oh, I can tell you about my first visit there. Now, this is back in 2004 when I decided I wanted to go out and see the Myrtles plantation for myself for the first time. And I was still skeptical about, I didn't know if ghosts really existed, but I grew up in a house where strange things had happened that we couldn't explain. It was built on Indian burial ground or Cherokee land. And I've told that story in prior episodes, but I'd already had my own little experiences, but as I got older, I got a little skeptical about what was I really seeing or experiencing. And I really got skeptical about places that would claim to be haunted, and these were places that were open to the public where you could pay. In fact, it was one of the ghost hunters that once said, any place that claims to be haunted and has a gift shop inside, be skeptical. You got to be skeptical. So I wondered, is this place as haunted as they say? I've heard these stories about Chloe and the Woodruff girls and William Winters, and there's other ghosts that, we'd be here all night talking about them. But I decided when I went, I said, to play it safe, it's my first visit, I'm going to stay in one of the garden rooms. They got these 3 or 4 garden room suites right next to the house that aren't connected to the house. They're separate. And I thought, I'll be safe out there. So I spent the night in the garden room. I got to tell you, that was a rough night. I was already excited because, I'm in this well-known haunted location. I'd seen it on Unsolved Mysteries. The house was like a celebrity to me. I was excited and nervous. I'm here at the Myrtles. And I remember sitting out there on the veranda all afternoon just watching and playing on my laptop and all this and enjoying it. But when darkfall came, I got a little scared because I was on my own. And in fact, the only other guests who were there were that old couple that I mentioned earlier, the one that lost her earrings and found them in the painting. They were in the suite inside. I was by myself in the garden rooms. So, but here I was thinking, if I'm not in the house, I won't experience anything. I didn't understand the whole property is haunted. So I'm in that garden room that night, and I had my laptop because I really didn't have TV, so I was watching the DVD. And that was funny too. When I got there, I forgot I had a disc already in there. I brought a couple of lighthearted movies to, I didn't want to watch anything scary. But I forgot when I cut the DVD on the laptop, I forgot there was a copy of Night of the Living Dead in there. And that comes up. I said, oh, no, I'm not watching this here in this haunted house. So I took that out and put in a comedy. And outside I could hear frogs croaking, crickets chirping, and every once in a while you hear rustling of leaves. And I got a little bit chicken. I wanted to go outside and walk the property, but I chickened out because I was by myself and I was still young. I was in my early 20s at the time, I guess, 2004. Yeah, or mid-20s. So I was still learning and still kind of nervous at the time. And so I decided not to go out there by myself. And I'm sitting there watching the DVD, and the lamp next to my bed starts flickering like somebody. I could even hear the knob turning as an antique lamp. And you can hear this squeaky of the knob turning, and the lights were flickering. And I'm watching this thing. I said, I got to do something here. I picked up my camera, I've got a little video on. I started trying to video and it stopped. I said, dadgummit, I guess they don't want me to film them. So I put the camera back. And about that time, I saw a shadow go run across the wall at the foot of my bed from the lamplight, like if a child had run by the foot of the bed. And I stopped, I'm looking. I said, uh-oh, it's about to hit the roof in here. So I'm sitting there and I'm Indian style with my legs crossed. I'm right at the edge of the bed and I'm listening. I've got the DVD off and I'm watching, I'm listening. I don't know how long I sat there. It could have been 30 minutes. I'm just waiting on something. And nothing happened. Then as I'm sitting there, all of a sudden, on this leg, I feel a little tiny cold hand come to rest on my leg. Nothing visible. It felt just like as if a cold, solid hand had come to rest on my leg. Next thing I know, I'm airborne. I came flying off that bed. And I flung myself, I about tripped over onto the floor, flying toward the door. And I reached the door, and my first thought was, I'm getting in the car. And here I am in my pajamas. I didn't grab my keys, but my first thought, I'm getting in the car. I'm driving. And I grabbed the doorknob and opened it. And as soon as I did, I turned the knob and started opening it. On the other side, I hear growl. I don't have a clue what it was. I didn't want to know what it was. But I stood there frozen. I said, I've got two choices here. I can open the door and find out whatever the heck that is growling, or I can stay in here with this child ghost. Get torn apart or get touched. Which one should I do? So I closed the door back, locked it, and I just stood there. And I turned every light, the bathroom light, the overhead light, the lamp was, every light was on. I just sat on that bed. And I guess I sat there for hours. I don't know if I dozed off a little bit, but I know sometime in the wee hours of the morning, as I fell across the top of the, listen to this, the top of the comforter on the bed, I fell asleep. A few hours later, daylight, I woke up. Now, mind you, I said I fell asleep on top of the comforter. When I woke up, I was in the bed, perfectly straight, with the covers pulled up to my chin, like somebody had tucked me in. Not only that, it was like somebody going around and took the whole covers in around the bed. And I'm just laying there like, what the heck? I said, I don't remember tucking myself in. Was that all a dream? And I realized, I said, that was not a dream. Because I was still, drowsy from not getting enough sleep. And I sat up and, got the covers off me and sat up, and it was 7 o'clock in the morning. I thought they were setting up for breakfast. So I went in there and I brushed my hair. I said, I just got to get out of this room. I put my clothes on. I didn't really look in the mirror much other than to comb my hair, but apparently I looked aside because when I went in the kitchen room, the kitchen house, the lady looked around. She goes, what happened? And I was standing there. I realized I'm shaking. I said, what? She goes, you're just as white as you can be. And I told her what happened. And, of course, one of the explanation she gave for the child was either that was one of the Woodruff girls or one of the slave children. They have little slave children ghosts they've seen on the property, the children of the slaves that used to work there. In fact, further off on the property, I've heard there are some slaves buried there. So some people have seen them skulking about outside, and they believe sometimes they have to come in the garden rooms and check out who's staying there. So, but I asked her about the growl. She goes, that I don't know. I've never heard of anybody experiencing a growl before. So I don't know if I heard a demon out there. I don't know if I heard an alligator out there. I don't know what I heard. I mean, they're not far from the bayou, so it could have been wildlife. But I'm just glad I didn't open that door to see what it was. And there's another little spirit there that's really fun, and his name is Mertz, and he is Tina Moss's old cat. Now, little old Mertz, he died on the plantation 10, 15 years ago. He apparently accidentally fell into the well that's on the side of the property there. It's covered up now, but it was not covered at the time, and he accidentally fell in. I guess he drowned or broke his neck, but he died. And people have seen his little spirit roaming the property. And this was not my first visit. My second visit in 2005, I said, I got to go back and check out. I want to go back and not be a chicken. I'm going to try to, actually see if I can sleep inside the house this time. And that's what I did. And that night, I went outside and I was walking around in the dark. And this was during the winter months. It was January, so it was kind of cold. It's Louisiana. It wasn't freezing cold, but it was kind of chilly. But it was comfortable. And I'm walking around. I kept hearing something scurrying. And there are some outside lights, but they're very dim. So you could see the sidewalk, but I couldn't see what was making the noise. I'm looking. I don't see anything on the sidewalk, but it sounded like something, tap, tap, tapping on the sidewalk. So I turned around with my camera and I snapped a picture. And the flash, I could see empty sidewalk. But when I looked in the picture, there's a black cat on the sidewalk facing me with a blank, pitch black face. Even though there's a flash, the cat has no face. And I showed that the next morning to the staff when they came back, and they said, yeah, that's Mertz. You've caught him on camera. And I've still got that picture. I should have brought that tonight. I could have showed it. It's just amazing. So they've got everything from ghost children to ghost cats to crazy gators that growl at you, I guess. Maybe that was a gator ghost. But yeah, be sure to check out the Myrtles. Now they've built some cottages out there on the property that are bed and breakfast cottages. But, just be leery. There's even a older cabin there that belonged to a caretaker back in the 1920s. Apparently he was robbed and shot dead one night when he was by himself on the property. His cottage is open, but people have had activity in there. The ghost hunters, when they visited and shot their episode, in that cabin, they caught footage of the lamp being dragged across the table by itself. And they played that on the episode. People have seen that caretaker walking the grounds. They say they look around, there's an old gentleman standing there staring at the really stern. He's got these 1920 clothes and hat on. And they'll be watching them, and suddenly he vanishes. And they say it's the ghost of that caretaker. They don't know who murdered him. He was shot and robbed, and the killer fled and was never identified. So I guess he's restless because his murder was never solved. But at the same time, he likes to still oversee the plantation. So sometimes he's seen walking the grounds and looking after everybody. So behave. You might get that stern apparition looking at you. But for those of you who like sex and stuff out there, there has been a naked Native American apparition lady seen in the pond. I don't know who she is or why, but there's a pond out back with a bridge that walks over to a little island in the middle. It's a closed off pond. It's a perfectly circular pond, probably the size of this restaurant here. And the little island in the middle, you can walk over the bridge, and there's a little gazebo there you can sit in. Nighttime, people have seen a naked Native American lady sitting out there, stretched across the seats very seductively. But when men approach her, she disappears. So, don't think you're going to get any action. She's going to probably vanish before you get there. But I'm not sure why she likes to appear in the nude like that, or who she is, or apparently, it was old Indian grounds there, so she may have been attached to the land somehow back in the past. But I thought that was a funny ghost story there. There's a lot of ghost stories at the Myrtles. I just say go and check it out yourself. Spend the night if you dare. And I was trying to not miss any other experiences I had. I know one time I've stayed there at least a total of 5 nights. 2 of those nights were back to back in the Bradford suite. I saw a little girl apparition. The lights would kind of flicker. And one of the times there was a rider staying upstairs in the bedroom above there. And the next day at breakfast, he showed some footage he'd caught that night. He woke up to a noise, and the chandelier over his bed was swinging wildly from the roof. And that's another report, that the chandeliers like to swing on their own. And he caught video of it and showed that to us at breakfast time. So it's got a lot of scary stories, but it's interesting. And I've never been hurt or harmed. Oh, I remember another incident now when I stayed at the Bradford suite. They have a tendency of keys getting lost or moved around there for unknown reasons. And that happened to me. When it got after dark, before the candlelight tours that night, I decided to walk the property a little bit just to look around. So I took the key and put it in my pocket, and I go out the main door. There's two doors. The one that goes out to the back, the main door of the suite, and there's a side door that goes out on the front veranda. And if you stay in that room, you get that veranda all to yourself. I love it out there. But I left the room with the key in my pocket. I put it in there, and and for a little while as I was walking outside, I had my hands in my pocket, and I felt it. Well, when I got close to time for the tours to start, I decided to go back to the room and freshen up a little bit. I get to the door, I reach in my pocket, and the key is gone. Well, I'm afraid I must have dropped it out of my pocket on the property, and there's no telling where, because I walked all around that place, so God knows where I dropped it. So I went to the staff in the kitchen room. I told them, my key is gone. It's not in my pocket. She rolls her eyes and says, oh, no. And calls the other staff member, we got another set of missing keys. I said, I guess this is a regular thing. She goes, yeah, they go missing all the time. She said, let's go walk and retrace your steps. So we walked out, and we get around that side of the house where I walked. We're checking the grass. She's got a flashlight. We're looking up and down the sidewalk. We get around the veranda, and I step up there, and I said, I didn't come up here, but let me just look. And on that veranda door, on the outside, there's the key. The keys are perfectly slid into the doorknob. I had taken them from my pocket and stuck them in the key slot and left them there. They're just dangling, pretty as you please. And I laughed. I thought it was hilarious. And she kind of laughed. I said, well, at least they're not missing. I hate to have to pay for a new set of keys. But that's amazing. They disappeared from my pocket and wound up in the doorknob. I wonder if David Merlin could do that trick. Those ghosts are pranksters. I would be willing to bet if he stayed there, it wouldn't be as much terrifying as it would be entertaining. They can entertain you. They love to fool with guests. And you don't even have to stay there. I've been there. One time I stayed out there with a friend of mine who owns a plantation down the highway. And while I was there, I said, I can't be here and not visit the Myrtles. So I told her I was going to go visit the Myrtles. She said, yeah, go ahead. So I drove down there, and I stayed a few hours, had a drink. They got a restaurant and bar on the property. So I had a little mint julep in the bar, walked the property, and I said, I got to take a tour. I want to see inside the house because it's been a while since I'd been there. So I went in, and as we're walking, I'd already had past experience with the little girls, and I seem to attract child ghosts everywhere I go. So while we're walking the house, the tour guide starts telling about the little girls that have been seen. All of a sudden, my hands are hanging down to my sides. All of a sudden, I feel a little hand slip into each one of my hands. Like a child is on each side, and they took my hand. I'm just standing there. And I looked down, and I could just feel they were there. I just smiled. But I didn't want to speak out. I didn't want to startle anybody or interrupt the tour guide, so I just stayed quiet. And for the next several minutes as we walked, I felt those little hands in mine, like they were walking with me. And then after a while, it went away. So after the tour was over, I told the tour guide about what I'd experienced. She said, oh, yeah, all the time I get that. Either they want to hold my hand or they want to tug on my shirt like they're trying to get my attention. I look around, there's nobody there. So, yeah, the Myrtles is very interesting. I believe full force that it's haunted. I don't think it's just a ploy. I don't think it's just an advertising gimmick. I mean, I'm sure it helps to attract tourists for them, but they're not making it up. That place is really haunted. I've had my own experiences. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I don't doubt it. But I'm always respectful. I love it now when I go. I'm always talking to them when I go in there. Hey, children, and hey, Chloe, in case she's watching. And as long as you respect them and you're pleasant with them, they don't mind you being there. They like to have guests, but just be prepared. If you stay the night, you just might get tucked in by unseen hands, but they're just looking after you. And that was the story of the Myrtles. And it's already 8:15. I talked that long?
You talked that long.
Yeah.
It was good. It was great.
Golly bum.
That means I only have 15 more minutes to come and join you back.
Dadgummit.
The stories were great.
Because you want to talk about dreams, didn't you?
That's okay. That's okay.
I didn't know. I didn't even look at the time. I didn't know it was that late.
So tell me about this dream, that you were having the other night. Let me grab my phone.
But what? No, this happened about a year or two ago. Now I was given a doll by Cherie Sean that we visited, and she calls it the nightmare doll. And the spirit, what's his name? Lewell or something. That's kind of a weird name. It's like Lewis, but it's Lewell or something like that. She calls him Wyatt. I think that's her nickname for him. But he's a mischievous spirit, and people who have touched his doll, in fact, the lady she got him from had bought him at an antique store. And she said every time she touched it, she would have a violent nightmare. And she told her mother about it, and the mother touched it, and then she had a violent nightmare. So she sent the doll to Cherie, and Cherie took it, and she'd already been experienced the haunted dolls, and she laid down the law to him and said, as long as you respect me, I respect you, but please don't bother me. But unfortunately, he gave her a violent nightmare that night. So the next morning, she scolded him and set the boundaries again, and from there on, he never bothered her. But a year or two ago, she decided to rehome him, and she picked me out first. I was top of the list, yay! And I told her, yeah, I'd love to have him, But I said, I'm concerned about these violent nightmares you've all had. She said, well, just tell him when he gets there that he is to behave and be respectful. And when he got there and I opened the box, I could feel the energy. And I told him, I need to pick you up, but I want to make sure it's okay with you. May I please put my hands on you and pick up your doll? And I felt like it was okay, so I picked him up. I took a picture with him. I stuck him on the highest shelf in the doll room that I have, and I've left him there. I have not touched him since. And it was fine to begin with, but 6 months later, I had a dream one night that was, to this day, I can still remember. It was so vivid. I wasn't me. I was somebody else in the dream. I found myself in this old truck, like from the 1940s, old pickup truck. I'm driving down this I didn't recognize the town. It's a small town in the middle of the night, like wee hours of the morning. And it's dark and kind of foggy, and there's street lights on. I don't know who I am. When I look in the mirror, I see an older guy, like maybe 50s or 60s, probably 60s. And in the distance, as I'm going up this hill, I see a figure standing under a street lamp, and he's wearing a coat and a hat. I can't see his face, but when I get closer, he looks up. And as I start to pass, I see him pull his hand out of his pocket. He's got a gun, and he aims it. And I hit the gas, and I'm trying to speed on, but before I can get on, I hear the glass break behind me like a bullet coming through. I felt it go right through the back of my head. And my last thought was, so this is what it feels like. Then I slumped on the steering wheel. The next thing, I'm waking up in my bed. And I guess that thought, so this is what it feels like, I guess I was thinking about death. So this is what it feels like, to get shot. And I thought, was that him was that doll that caused that just out of the blue? Or was that just a random, maybe one of the other spirits was showing me how they died? I don't know. I've got a lot of creepy dolls in my house, so I don't know, where that came from. It was so vivid. It was like a vision more than a dream.
I have a hard time telling what dolls doing what and what items doing what.
That was a scary nightmare.
Because some of them will turn the lights off and on, and some of them will. The dark TV last night at the house, I've got one that's called Heather, and got another one called Mabel, and my TV last night kept going off and on, and this was way before the storms, and it's an old TV. It's like, don't tear my TV up. It's all I have right now. Stop it. Because I leave it on almost all the time. And Sony or Samsung starts with an S.
Yeah.
TV, so it's a good TV. And it's like, don't touch it, don't touch it. It's back when they first started making those big ones that you can hang on the wall.
Yeah.
It's about that thick,
Uh-huh.
And probably will need replacing in the next couple of years. But it's huge, and I don't want to get rid of it yet. But I have a lot of weird dreams. One of the most recent ones was a truck accident,
Oh,
like a big explosion. The truck, the 18-wheeler was going down, and it was like one of those that carries the fuel,
oh yeah.
and it started tumbling, and I was inside the truck. Why I would be inside the truck, I don't know. But it was so vivid, and like I could feel everything that was and the motion and the movement. I woke up in the all tangled up in my blankets, and it was burning him on fire. And but I have a lot of those kind of dreams where it's so vivid that you really feel it.
Yeah.
But here's a suggestion. If you ever dream there's a toilet, don't use that.
Ah, man, that happened. I know what you mean.
Do not
At
use
least
that toilet.
twice. I can remember not long ago. I've had that dream and woke up miserable because something happened. And that's the worst.
Yes, there's not a toilet in your dreams.
No.
Remember this. Remember this. There is not a toilet in your dreams. It's like you gotta go, and you finally find the toilet, and it's like there's not a toilet there.
That's why I try to make sure I use the bathroom before I go to bed. But if you've had too much to drink and it sneaks up on you in your sleep, oh man.
Make sure you not use the
Oh, because there's nothing like being half asleep trying to change the sheets.
We're trying to make
Because you want to get back in bed so bad, and you got to do all this work.
trying to run to the bathroom.
Yeah, that after you're already halfway emptied the tank.
Oh
Oh
I've
my
done that a couple
gosh!
times in my life.
I said, yeah, I'm too young to wear those depends.
Or too old.
Oh well, yeah.
Well, it depends on
I
how
was
you
thinking
look
the
at it.
adult depend. Yeah. Too old to be young and too young to be old. That was on Friday. I'm too old to be young and too young to be old.
I don't remember that part, but
Kathy Bates, after she had that run there with the punk at the store, and she goes to the retirement home where Jessica Tandy is, and she's crying about what happened. And, yeah, everybody's beating up on her, all these young people.
Somebody said, yeah, mine would be unsweetened with artificial sweetener. LOL.
Yeah, they were talking about the tea before. We mentioned the tea. Oh, actually, yeah, Kelsey mentioned it, that they've given you a free gallon or a gallon of tea.
Yes, and yeah, it is pretty cool that Burger King lets us use their area. Sorry, guys, I didn't have my phone where I could see what you were posting. I was sitting over there to the side. Had to run to the restroom earlier, and while Kevin was telling this story, which was pretty awesome. I want to go.
You want to go to the Myrtles?
I want to go to Myrtles. Well, we stayed up in little cottage bed and breakfast area up in Coleman, Alabama, and I walked in, and there was a lady in there, and there was not supposed to be anyone there. And so I figured she was getting her stuff out. You know, she had stayed the night before. And I walked back out, and I was waiting, and the caretaker came, and or the owner, whatever he is, and he said, "Y'all go on in." I said, "I was just going to wait for the lady to come out." And he's like, "There's nobody here." And I was like, "Okay." She was in period clothing. Well, later that evening, probably, it was way before dark. It's probably 4 or 5 o'clock before it got dark. And I'm out there talking to him, and Kelsey's doing something else inside, and across the battlefield, I see a shadow run across. That kind of startled me.
Oh.
I don't know why that particular one startled me, but the older lady, we went into the store. He had a little old store there, and I walked in the store, and her picture was hanging on the wall.
Oh.
The lady that was in the
neat.
But got a bunch of good stuff there.
I did miss a awesome story when I was talking about the Myrtle. Just reminded me. They used to have during Halloween time at the Myrtles. They don't do it anymore. They used to have on the candlelight tour, they would dress up. They would have people dress up in period costume, and one young black girl would dress up as Chloe and be in that downstairs bedroom I was talking about where all the activity would take place. When they bring the tour in, one of those old-fashioned screens was in the corner, and she would step out from behind it and go up to the bed like she was making it up. And then she would stand there until the tour guide was done, and she'd step back behind the screen. And during one of the performances, she came flying out of that house. They weren't even done with the tour. She came flying out of that house screaming and crying. They asked her what happened. During that performance, when she stepped back behind the screen, guess who was waiting for her?
Chloe.
Chloe, the real Chloe. Now, the actress had one of those candles like they used to have on those tours, and she's standing there frozen. She says Chloe leaned over and went and blew out the candle. And that's when she tore out of that room and about knocked over the screen in the process. And they had to call her family to come pick her up. She would not go back to the house. She was sobbing. I forgot that that was one of my favorites. That's scary, but it was one of my favorites about the Myrtles. And now they don't think they do anymore because they can't keep actors there because they say if they're there long enough, things start happening. And they're wearing period clothing. That attracts.
Well, we should go and do it.
That's one of those bucket list things.
Bucket list, yeah.
But yeah, but they say too. The tour guide told me that another one of the things they said is very often they've had people come. You mentioned the period clothing woman. She said this very often they've had people come at least once a week. Somebody at the end of the tour will come up and say, "Oh, I love that adorable little girl you had in that room in period clothing back there." And she'll say, "We don't have anybody in period clothing. There's no kids here. But we saw a little girl." And she'll go look, and there's nobody in there. And she has to explain to them, "We have spirits here. You may have seen." Of course, that scares. Some of them are fascinated. Some of them make a hasty exit. But yeah, that place is active. I mean, it's good. No matter what time of the year, it seems like there's something going on.
We need to go one weekend and set up some cameras. Kevin, go ahead and tell who you are again.
I am myhauntedDolls.com. Oh, my new audiobook. Finally, I have an audiobook version of my book, The Legends of Indian Narrows, Ghostly Childhood Memoirs, which I narrated myself. And then the book I published several years ago, but I decided to do an audiobook recently of that. And it's the stories of the old neighborhood I used to live in. I grew up in all the ghost stories and legends we had, including my own house and my experiences. So go check that out on Audible and Amazon. And it should be on iTunes. If it's not out there yet, it should be there in a couple of days if you have iTunes. So check that out. MyHauntedDolls.com has my books that I've published, including my Haunted Doll books. So check that out, or you can get them on Amazon, Kindle, Books A Million. The last novel I wrote, Crimson the Blood Painting, it's also an audio book performed by Lynn Thomas, who's a voice actress. And she did an amazing job, so check that out. And we're about to relocate, so I don't know in a few. Well, I have a few dolls I'm going to keep in the house, so I'll bring a few. There might be some nights I don't have any because they're going to be in storage. So I hope we get into a new house here soon. I have a bigger place to put my collection.
I had you something the other day.
Well,
Teddy Ruxpin.
A Teddy Ruxpin. I've seen those. I remember those when I was a kid. I've seen them online. The ones on eBay were expensive. The ones that work anyway.
This one works.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was a flea market find.
Oh, so you find stuff like that in flea markets and thrift stores.
Yeah. And I'm going to put batteries. I put batteries in them that were weak batteries, and so he didn't work very well. So I'm going to actually go and step up from the Dollar Tree batteries to the real batteries and put those in them and see how he does. But this is Kevin Kane with My Haunted Dolls. I'm Catherine Marie with Abnormal Alabama, and we've enjoyed you guys tonight, and we've enjoyed your stories tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here, and we will see you guys hopefully next week.
Yes.
And who knows what we'll have in store.
Oh.
Maybe we'll do the Dream I enjoyed Kevin's story so much, I didn't want to interrupt him. And yes, Kelsey, we miss you interrupting us tonight.
Yes.
But you guys have a great night.